everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Maven Money Talks. Today, we're thrilled to have Blaine Burch, founder of BHR Law Group, joining us. Blaine brings not only top-tier law firm experience, but also a deep understanding of family businesses, having grown up in one himself. Blaine experienced firsthand the complexities of selling a family business when his family's company, suppliers to Carl's Jr., Jack in the Box, Wolfgang Puck, and more, was sold during his law school years. This pivotal experience inspired him to help business owners protect and organize their legacy and wealth for the next generation. We'll dive into advanced estate planning, succession planning, and asset protection, key topics every business owner should know about to safeguard their legacy. So, Blaine, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Paolo.
Of course, yeah.
This is going to be great.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to dive into it. I know, obviously, anything with law, anything with trust can be complicated, but obviously we want to make sure that people kind of have a good understanding of what's in their best interests, why it's important, and everybody's situation is different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As with all types of planning, we want to make sure that we get ahead of the game,
right,
and have a good plan in place for when something happens, instead of trying to react to what is happening. And just like with financial planning, estate planning is just the same thing. Putting in a plan, making sure we have the right people in the right places when something does happen.
Awesome. Love it. Well, a couple things that I wanted to start off with. Obviously, we work with a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs. And so what are some specific things or key elements that business owners need to consider when kind of constructing their estate plan or looking into that?
There are a lot of different types of estate planning out there. And there's a lot of different attorneys that do estate planning. For anybody, not just business owners, I would say make sure that your attorney actually does estate planning. It isn't just an attorney that does maybe corporate transactional documents or anything else, because estate planning is a very niche type of the part of the law that requires kind of full-time study into it, because you're melding multiple types of tax laws, including income tax, estate tax, property taxes, and then also melding that in with the trust law, right? So there's probate code, but there's also trust law that changes all the time. So if you're not on top of it all the time, yes, you can put names into a form, and there are good forms out there, but the plan really isn't going to be there.
Right.
Now for business owners, you have another step, because you do kind of have this business. And when I'm talking about business owners, usually in my mind at least, I'm thinking of what my family did. So we had a family business, right? We had my dad who ran it, but we also had my grandparents who ran it before him.
Okay.
But it was very contained within the family, right?
Got it.
If there's not a plan in place for how that business is going to survive through death or transition or whatever, then it's not going to survive.
Right.
So you got to make sure that you have good communication with your attorney, and that it's not just a form type of plan.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I feel like you take the time to understand somebody's goals, what they're really looking to achieve, and again, everybody's plan is probably going to look a little bit different in terms of what their goals are and how things are currently established.
Yeah, absolutely. And because it's not just the family that has to kind of survive and have the plan for the family, but there's all these other people, right? You have employees, you have other advisors, you have a whole business that's run, you have customers. Without communication on that side of it, which a lot of estate planners will even ignore because they don't understand the complexities of the business. Yeah, the family may be okay, but the business is gonna wither and die,
right?
Because there is no communication there.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned something a little bit earlier about tax law and everything always changing, and I mean, we're at an interesting point right now where the the limits for the estates are set to sunset potentially next year. So all those things I think come into obviously make a huge impact, especially for business owners, because typically a large part of their net worth is in their business, and it tends to be significant. So
yeah, the estate tax exemption is kind of the big highlight. It's kind of like the marquee part of the tax law that people watch, and it is built into the law right now. It's going to be cut in half at the end of next year. What's really interesting is there's lots of changes that happen to the law that people don't realize. Right? Part of Biden's first tax proposal was to get rid of grantor trust. Would have changed how we do estate planning entirely.
Right.
And I don't think people even realize that it was there. There's decisions that come down from the courts all the time that change how we can do discounting and other things. We'll get into more advanced planning, but those things are there all the time.
Got it.
And so we're constantly watching those things. But yeah, the estate tax exemption is the big one because that's what everybody understands and sees.
So how can advanced planning help minimize estate taxes for future generations?
That's really simple. I mean, that is basically estate planning in its most basic form, right? There is this estate tax. And it's a high tax. It's
right.
a 40% tax on your net worth, not on income, not on what growth there is. It's not like capital gains. They literally, and what that net worth is, literally what you own, what your liabilities are, and if it's over the exemption amount, it's a 40% tax on that, right? So luckily right now we have a very high exemption, so most people are not dealing with that. But with a business, the last thing you want to have happen is your business to be worth a lot, but there not to be a lot of cash available, right? So if your business is worth a lot and you get hit with a multi-million-dollar tax bill and there's not the cash to pay for it, guess what? You're selling your business to pay a tax.
Right.
And that's why it doesn't survive, right?
Got it.
That's why it doesn't get down the generations. Planning ahead, there's ways to, one, leverage your exemption.
Okay.
Many people think that the estate tax is just at death. Well, they've tied it together so that you can use that exemption throughout your life. So there's a gift tax exemption as well, so you can gift things. So if you gift it out now, one, you get it out before a bunch of appreciation over your lifetime. Two, we can plan properly and use family limited partnerships and other things and non-voting shares to get a big deduction in the value. Even if that doesn't work, there are other ways like selling to a grantor trust and other things so that we can get all of your estate out without there being any estate tax. And there's, even for estates that are hundreds of millions of dollars, there are plans and strategies there to get that type of value out without any estate tax.
Got it.
Yeah.
I would imagine these things can't be done as quickly. So it takes time to plan some of these things out. What's a general timeline, like a minimal timeline, I guess, that if you are certain you're going to be passing the business over, that you would need to start kind of getting things in motion to again, have the benefit of planning these ways?
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that go into, how much time it's going to take because you just don't know what state the corporate documents are in and things like that.
Okay.
But it's going to take at least 6 months to really put a plan in. And many of these plans are lifetime plans, right? It's a plan, right? It's not like, again, people think of it as, I got my trust. No, it's not just the trust, it's the plan.
Right.
So yes, do the plan now. In fact, when I have clients that are starting a new business, right, that business is worth zero right now. We can move that out. We don't have to use any exemption. We're going to own it outside of your estate through some sort of irrevocable trust. Okay. You can still be the beneficiary. You can still get all the benefits that you do through ownership. You can manage it. You can do the investing, but it's not in your estate. It's outside of your estate. No matter where you are, talk to your attorney now. Get a plan in place for dealing with it, and then continue to talk to your attorney and have that plan continue for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Because I would imagine, especially with a family business too, things can change over time. Sure. Obviously, not just with laws and taxes, but just with the overall dynamic of the business, dynamic of what's going on with the family. So there's a number of things that could change from having the conversation of this is what we want to do and what we foresee things looking like, and actually, going through and executing on it. So.
And not just can it change, in my experience, it will change. Something will change. Over your lifetime, you have a plan in your 20s. It's going to be a different plan in your 30s, a different plan in your 40s, and then so on, right? My kids are kind of in that teenage range, and yes, what we thought our lives were going to be like before they were born was different from when they were babies, is different to now. And I'm sure as they are going to college and stuff, it's going to change.
So you mentioned something a little bit earlier, which was discussing irrevocable trusts and protecting assets. Can you talk a little bit further in terms of using an irrevocable trust to remove assets from your estate and what that looks like and how it works?
Yeah, so many times we'll have clients come and they think they know what they need. And so they'll just say, I need an irrevocable trust. Well, I guess I should explain the difference between revocable and irrevocable. Most trusts that you hear about and talk about and what most people have is what we call a revocable living trust, right? And that is a testamentary document that avoids probate. And then on the other side of that is what we call an irrevocable trust. But that's all the other trusts that there are out there that do all sorts of different things are irrevocable trusts.
Got it.
Yes, you have your revocable living trust, but everything else is in what we call an irrevocable trust. But when we're looking at doing estate tax planning and getting things out of your estate, we will use usually something that's called a irrevocable intentionally defective grantor trust, right? An IDGT, IDGT, right? Okay. You think of the name and why are we intentionally making a trust defective? Well, there were rules about how people could split up their income because when trusts first started, there was still a progressive tax brackets, right? And so instead of someone paying for all of their income as one, they would split it up amongst a bunch of different trusts, and each one of those trusts would pay a lower tax bracket. Right. Well, they said, well, that's not really fair. Right. So if you hold certain powers over a trust, we're going to call it a grantor trust, and it's going to be defective as to dividing out your income. So all that income is going to come back to you. Got it. Well, we use that now, right, to intentionally make trust defective because we want the business owner or the client to be liable for the taxes for income tax purposes, but have it be a completed gift for estate tax purposes. Got it. And there's actually a line you can play where you hold certain powers and don't hold certain powers that make it a completed gift for estate tax purposes, yet you are still liable for the income taxes. Got it. The reason we do that is we can do a lot by having you be the taxpayer. One is we can use all of your estate tax exemption and gift assets out. If there's more that we still need to get out, well, now we can sell those assets out. And there's not going to be any income tax because you are the taxpayer on both sides of that deal. Got it. And so the IRS says, well, we just pretend that transaction didn't happen. So that's great. So now we can sell a bunch of assets out and we don't use any exemption. Interesting. And then we can use you being able to pay those taxes on an annual basis as another annual gift that you can make to your kids or to whoever the beneficiaries are each year, right? So if I have $100,000 of taxes that I have to pay on these assets that belong to my children, well, even though there's an annual exemption on how much I can give to them, now I can give them $100,000 and there's no tax on that. Got it. So interesting. Basically, you can reduce the size of the assets that are inside the estate and let the assets that are outside of the estate grow tax-free. And I think so. We play that game to just make sure that we're using the tax laws to our benefit, whether it's defective or not defective. Got it. Yeah. And so, and it sounds like, so this is something obviously that you can do, throughout your lifetime, as opposed to, hey, I've passed away and now I'm giving my assets or my kids or whoever my beneficiaries are benefiting from it. You're being able to see the benefit of, your work essentially. Absolutely. Time is our best friend in estate planning. If we can take time, then I can move assets out now, yes, but maybe I don't want to move them all out right now. And maybe I want to move them out, but I don't want to use exemption. Great, I can move them out and then continue to pay those taxes, and you can shrink. I mean, you can really shrink a large estate over time. And time becomes our best friend in shrinking that estate. Wow, that's great. So this has all been great. So why is succession planning so critical for business owners? The most important part of their business to them is controlling it, right? Most of them have built something out of nothing, and therefore they want to be the ones running it. And don't really trust even maybe their son or their closest ally in the business to run everything by themselves. And so, and believe me, I get it. I've seen what happens with families and the amount of time and effort they have to put into it to grow it. And honestly, I was that, brat of a son, right? That probably was not in a position when I was young to really be able to take that over, right? And understand the amount of work that went into it. How do we make sure that transition happens in a way that is successful, right? And we do that through not just the estate planning, but kind of what we call business succession planning.
Okay.
And that really comes down to communication. I love bringing in the next generation, maybe the next 2 generations, into these meetings with the parents and letting them know, here's what the plan is.
Right.
Here's what mom and dad put into building this business, so that we all understand, why they're making the decisions they're making, why, maybe Johnny is going to be the new CEO and the others aren't going to be involved as much, but we're going to take care of you through other ways.
Got it.
As long as we have a good plan in place and that communication is there, you have a much better chance of making it through that transition to the next generation. There's the stats out there that, most businesses die within 2 or 3 generations. I believe it's because of communication. It has to be, you really have to make sure that not just the ownership is passed on properly, but all the management roles, right? All those control roles. So dad was in control, mom and dad were in control of all these things. Now we're going to split up those controls. And how is that really going to is the business going to be able to function that way? With all these different people taking on a piece of these roles? Or are we going to just put one person in there and say, you get to run it, and now it's yours? And what does that do to his relationship or her relationship with his siblings, right?
Got it.
Is there going to be animosity there? Do we need to make sure that there's other things that take care of the other kids? So you really have to dive into not just the ownership and assets and planning of it, but you kind of have to get to know all the family members.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
What the family dynamics are and how they're all going to interplay with each other, and who wants to be involved in the business and who doesn't want to be involved in the business.
Right.
And kind of come up with a plan together on how that's really going to look.
Got it. So do you help out with, let's say, in the succession actually taking place and kind of protecting, again, we're using family type of business right now, but protecting, say, the parents from the company being run poorly and ultimately their kind of retirement dwindling away from the business not being successful upon transition?
In most of my experience, even though we transfer ownership maybe to a trust or something and get it out of the estate, the clients are going to be involved in the business for the rest of their lives, right? So usually there's not too much of an issue with them, losing their retirement. Although I have had clients that have done that as well, right? One of their kids is already running the business and they're out, and there are things we can do, and usually that's done through insurance and other things to make sure that there is something there,
some type of protection. Yeah.
Protecting from liability, from outside liability, that's something we build into all of our estate planning.
Okay.
And so you never know. We're in a very litigious society and state. California's pretty litigious, and very plaintiff friendly. If you have the appearance of having the big pocket, which if you're the company, you are of the appearance of having the big pocket, judgments can come down against you. And so how do we protect against that as well?
Got it.
Irrevocable trusts are a great way to deal with that, right?
Okay.
Gifting and things. There are look backs, but that's why you kind of get out ahead of the game, right? If you've done the gifting now, in 3 years you're pretty safe,
right?
And so we will look at definitely how to protect the parents. Now, there's also other planning that you can do that's for asset protection, such as private retirement plans and things like that, which we do. Okay. And that can help protect owners of businesses even before they gift it out to their kids. So there is planning as far as making sure that they have something for retirement. That's done kind of on the financial side through insurance and things like that.
I guess where I've personally seen it go in a negative route is actually where a business owner is sold to an employee, for example, and not necessarily a family member, and they are ready to retire and be done with it. And then the employee just doesn't run the business well, and it's not a good situation, and there wasn't any planning done on their side, so there was nothing set in place as like a parachute, so yeah,
in those cases I would strongly suggest against carrying the note of a sale to an employee or something like that. Get other bank financing involved so that you're paid out at the time, right? And now they are dealing with a bank just like they would if they took out any other loan.
Yeah. What are some common pitfalls that business owners face when developing a succession plan?
The pitfalls, I think, are the client kind of grasping onto that control and not being willing to let anything go. When we talk about irrevocable trust, we talk about a trustee is going to have some authority, maybe a trust protector. If we put it into a family limited partnership, maybe some other family member that's a manager or something, they tend to get real nervous about giving up that control, right? Yeah. We build in ways for them to control the investment, right? But it is a little getting used to those types of controls because they're different. It's not direct control, right? That is one. A lot of times they will grasp onto that control and not do the planning because they don't want. They're afraid of giving up the control.
Got it.
Right. Another pitfall would be someone that, like I said, doesn't communicate well with the kids. We've seen this multiple times with families. They have a good plan in place and they've actually taken care of other children through other reasons, through other ways and everything, but the business is going to one child. Great. But they don't tell the children. Okay. And then they die.
Oh no.
And now the children are kind of surprised by what mom and dad did.
Got it.
And some take an offense to it or think that mom and dad didn't love me as much and why did they get that and just because there wasn't communication, now there's a fight. Right. We hate that. Right. So communication again is really important. And then the other, just not having any sort of plan in place. Right. Again, business owners are worried about their business and very oftentimes don't have the time to do good planning. Right. And so mom and dad pass away and now there is no plan in place and who's running this and who's stepping in and does anybody even really have the skills to do it? Right. So those are the biggest pitfalls, I think.
Great. No, that sounds about right. So we've talked a good amount, obviously, on why it's important, when to get things started. Let's move forward in the process and say there's a successful exit and or transition of the company, and now these business owners have actually unlocked a lot of their wealth from their business and have received a large lump sum from the sale of their business. What are some things that they can do in terms of utilizing their trusts, utilizing different types of trusts to help manage the tax liability that comes along with that and taxes in the future?
We've talked about the estate tax stuff and that's pretty similar whether you still have the business or whether it's cash or in some other sort of asset. Those types of planning things are the same. But when you're looking at exiting a business, right, selling it, even if you're selling it to someone in your family or an employee, there are lots of tools out there, right? So if you're doing it to an employee or a group of employees, ESOPs are great. If you're selling it to your child, there are ways to get tax planning involved there as well. And then there's just good charitable planning as well. Now, it's best if there is some charitable intent already, right? Many times clients come in and we talk to them about charitable trusts and they just have no interest in having that charitable aspect to their planning. That's fine. Right. Those types of trusts just aren't going to be the ones we use. Right. But if they do, lots of people are already donating a good portion of their wealth and income to churches or other things, and so we can build that into the planning and actually use it to their benefit. So things like a charitable remainder trust or a charitable lead trust. Where we're actually doing, those are called split interest trusts, right? Okay. There is a lifetime annuity payment that goes either to you or a charity, and then there's a remainder component that goes to you or the charity. But because there is that charitable component, you're able to, one, avoid or defer income taxes because you're selling the business as part of a charity.
Right.
And then grow those assets over time in a tax-free environment. And then you're paying taxes usually as the money's coming out to you, right?
Right. Makes sense.
But because you're able to grow a much larger sum, instead of cutting it in half
Right.
and then trying to grow that,
Yep.
You actually come out ahead even with the charitable payments.
Right.
So, there's lots of tools out there. Again, got to get ahead of the game,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
IRS hates it when they see a business go into a charitable remainder trust and then 2 days later it's sold because it kind of looks like you knew you were going to sell it, right?
Right.
And so they don't want you to do that.
Right.
If you're going to put it into a charitable remainder trust, it's great to have it in maybe a year or two beforehand.
Got it.
And again, it doesn't mean you lose the business.
Right.
You can still take payment as compensation. You can still you can still be in charge of the investment and everything else. You just have it in a trust that is getting ready to sell it. So I would say optimal, like 3 years before you're looking to sell a business, like let's get it into a charitable trust and start doing some planning.
Right.
But usually, again, these people are coming in, months before they're ready to sell.
Yeah. No, we try and get in front of the conversation. And as soon as, we bring it up to clients proactively of, have you thought about your exit strategy? What does that look like? What does life look like after selling the business?
Yeah.
Most business owners have, again, they live and breathe their business. And so if there's charitable intent, like, hey, is some passion going to be taking over after you sell your business that you're going to be working more in line with, that we can also use from a tax strategy standpoint? Sure. The great thing is for our financial planning software too, we can illustrate the differences of these things and what this looks like over the long term and what it does to the estate and all of that. But again, you've got to start with at least some ideas and thoughts and start the planning to evaluate, what makes the most sense for you.
Yeah. And, the best advice I've heard is have an exit plan as you start your business, right?
Yeah.
Like
start with the end in mind.
Even if it is, I'm going to give it to my kids or I'm going to build this, know how you're going to get out at some point, because if you don't, you're going to be that guy holding on to the control and never doing any plan.
Awesome. Well, that's been a lot of great information today. Obviously, I think we touched on almost an ideal timeline, which is immediately once the thought kind of enters your head. And so that was great. How can people get in touch with you for further information or questions or anything like that?
Yeah, my office is pretty available. I'm on LinkedIn. We have a website. You can find us in kind of the normal ways, but it is bhrlawgroup.com. And if you want to talk to me, you just set up an appointment. There's a link right on there. You can see my calendar and book an appointment. So it's pretty simple.
Awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat. Any final thoughts, anything else you want to add before closing up today?
You were kind of saying stories. It's hard for me to tell stories about clients, but just my own family, right? My grandparents started a business. It transferred to my father semi-smoothly, and he was an only child.
Okay.
So, adding more children always makes it more complex.
Yeah.
So I've kind of seen how that happened, and his relationship with his father was difficult for a long time because of that transfer of control.
Right.
And then we saw it kind of coming to us, me and my sisters. I have 3 sisters. And then just kind of sold quickly because the right price came in to sell it,
Got
right?
it.
So I've seen it move through a couple generations and then sold, and there are so many aspects, right? My father is in great health and always has been. Had to start taking beta blockers because his heart just was just from the stress alone of going through all those things.
Got it.
Was putting him in the hospital, and so. I understand how clients and business owners really, feel about their businesses. I've seen it happen. And I understand that some of these ideas are novel for them and are strange and may become difficult to accept. But the planning really is there to help and protect them.
Right.
It is a matter of getting used to it. And if they are able to find an attorney that they trust and want to talk to,
Right.
and they will open up and talk to them, the planning that can take place is just going to be that much better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Well, again, thanks for your time today. Thanks for coming in and talking to us. Really appreciate it. We'll have Blaine's info up so you can easily contact him. And again, thanks for coming in and hope you enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paolo.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah.